The screen glows red. Disposal protocol. Thorne, E. My name, my death warrant. Marcus Sterling planted the evidence, and HR's already baiting the trap. I've got one shot. Copy the files before Miller kicks down that door. The drive's in my hand, but the system's screaming. Access logged, security alert. Someone wanted me to find this, and now they're watching. The server room hummed with a low, bone-deep vibration that rattled Elias's molars. Rows of black cabinets stretched into the dimness, their blinking blue status lights casting rhythmic shadows against the polished floor. Cold air blasted from the floor vents, smelling of ozone and scorched dust. Elias pressed his thumb against the biometric scanner. The device chirped, painting his skin in a sickly crimson glow before the rack clicked open. His fingers drifted over the tangled nest of fiber optic cables. He slid the encrypted drive into the port. On his handheld monitor, the progress bar crept forward, illuminating the deep creases in his palms. A file titled Disposal Protocol flickered into view. Elias tapped the screen, scrolling through a spreadsheet of names, severance packages, and non-disclosure agreements. His breath hitched. Marcus Sterling's digital signature sat at the bottom of a directive to liquidate the pension fund of the entire logistics division. This wasn't just a corporate restructuring. It was a digital death warrant. The 40-page strategic media plan outlined a meticulous character assassination. Marcus Sterling, the CFO with the Arctic white shirts and the predatory eyes, had chosen his victim. Elias Thorne was to be the face of a $1 million embezzlement scheme by Friday. A heavy boot scuffed against the linoleum outside the glass partition. Elias yanked the drive, the metal casing burning cold against his skin. "Working late, Elias?" The voice belonged to Miller, the night security lead. Miller leaned against the doorframe, jingling a ring of brass keys. He didn't move toward the console, instead remaining in the shadows. Elias could hear the faint, vibrating hum coming from the man's throat, a low, haunting funeral dirge that made the hair on Elias's neck stand up. "Updating the cooling logs," Elias said, sliding the drive into his sock. "The fans in Rack 4 sound like a jet engine." Miller stepped into the light, eyes tracking the sweat bead rolling down Elias's temple. "Sterling hates noise. He says it disrupts the harmony of the profit margins." The guard paused, tilting his head. "Finish up. The building goes into full lockdown in 3 minutes." Elias watched the shadow of the large man retreat. He leaned his forehead against the cold metal of the server rack, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. 1, 2, 3, 4. He counted the pulses, trying to find the ground. The disposal protocol was real. The man who signed his paychecks was currently building a cage around his life, and the door was already beginning to swing shut. The air in the server room felt increasingly thin, as if the massive machines were consuming all the oxygen to keep their processors cool. Elias pulled his phone from his pocket, the screen's glow harsh in the dark. A message appeared from an encrypted handle. "Watch your 6. HR just sent the bait." It was Sarah Johnson. Elias could almost smell the faint scent of thermal paper and old binders that always followed her. Sarah was the ghost in the machine, the IT specialist who lived behind server racks and avoided eye contact like it was a physical blow. She was his only eyes on the inside. "I see it, Sarah," Elias whispered into his headset, his voice trembling. "I have the protocol metadata, but Miller is patrolling. He's humming that song again." "Focus, Elias," Sarah's voice crackled, sounding like gravel being crushed. "HR just hit send on a company-wide memo. They're calling it a financial discrepancy audit. They're setting the stage. If you stay in that room, you're a sitting duck. You need to get to the service elevator. The firewalls are tighter than usual, Elias noted, his fingers dancing over the keyboard. It's like the system is breathing, Sarah. It's reacting to me. That's because it is, she replied. Sterling didn't just buy software. He bought an ecosystem. Every move you make is a data point. Get out. Now. Elias turned to leave, but the heavy magnetic lock on the door clicked with the force of a gunshot. The red light above the frame began to pulse. Through the reinforced glass, he saw Miller. The guard wasn't jingling his keys anymore. He was wrapping a pair of heavy leather gloves around his knuckles, his face a mask of brutal intent. Subverted, Elias backed away from the door, his eyes scanning the narrow aisle of server racks. He was trapped in a cage of humming silicon and cold steel. As Miller began to punch the override code into the external keypad, Elias felt a strange, cold clarity wash over him. He wasn't a fighter, but he knew this room. He knew the weight of the hardware. He reached into the open rack and gripped a heavy, rack-mount server blade. It was a solid slab of steel and circuitry, weighing nearly 20 pounds. As the door hissed open, Miller lunged, his massive frame filling the doorway. The guard's fist swung in a wide arc, whistling through the air, but Elias dropped to a crouch. He counted the floor tiles, 1, 2, 3, positioning himself with the geometric precision of an architect. Elias swung the server blade with both hands. The metal corner caught Miller in the ribs with a sickening thud. The big man gasped, the funeral dirge in his throat cutting off into a wet wheeze. Elias didn't stop. He used the momentum to shove the server blade into Miller's chest, driving the guard backward toward the wire mesh equipment cage at the back of the room. Miller stumbled, his boots skidding on the polished floor. With a final, desperate heave, Elias threw his entire weight forward. Miller hit the back of the cage, and Elias slammed the gate shut, sliding the heavy brass bolt into place. Miller roared, his bandaged hands gripping the wire mesh, shaking the entire structure. But the bolt held. Elias stood back, gasping for air, his lungs burning with the scent of ozone. He had done it. He had outmaneuvered the fixer. He reached down and grabbed the fallen drive, feeling a surge of triumph. He had the metadata. He had the proof that the disposal protocol was created on Sterling's private terminal. This was the smoking gun. With this, he could go to the board or the police and end this nightmare before it truly began. He felt a rare smile touch his lips, a moment of pure, unadulterated victory. He tapped his headset. Sarah, I got him. Miller's locked in the cage. I have the drive. I'm coming out. There was a long, agonizing silence on the other end. When Sarah finally spoke, her voice was a hollow whisper. Elias, look at the door. Elias turned. The red light wasn't just a lockdown signal. A small, high-definition camera mounted above the frame was swiveling, its lens zooming in on his face, then down to the server blade he had used as a weapon, and finally to the drive in his hand. That wasn't a security failure, Elias, Sarah said, her voice trembling. The lock didn't glitch. The invitation to the server room, the metadata you found, it was all too easy. What are you talking about? Elias asked, the cold returning to his bones. Sterling wanted you to take that drive, she said. The metadata isn't proof of his guilt. It's been altered. It now shows that you created the protocol to blackmail him, and the footage of you attacking a security guard and stealing hardware, it's already being uploaded to the corporate cloud. You didn't just find the evidence, Elias. You just finished the script for your own execution. Elias looked at the drive in his hand. It felt like a live coal. He hadn't outsmarted anyone. He had walked into the center of a trap and slammed the door behind himself. His victory was the final piece of evidence Marcus Sterling needed to destroy him. The silence that followed Sarah's revelation was heavier than the hum of the servers. Elias felt the floor beneath him tilt, the numbers he used to ground himself, 1, 2, 3, slipping away like sand. He was no longer the invisible observer. He was the lead actor in a tragedy of his own making. "I have to get out of the building," Elias said, his voice a clipped, desperate rasp. "You can't use the main elevators," Sarah replied, the crinkle of her thermal paper receipts audible over the line. "Your key card is already being restricted. I can see the permissions dropping in real time. You're being quarantined, Elias. They're locking down every floor except your home department. They want you contained." Elias ran for the service stairs, his heart hammering against his ribs. 1, 2, 3, 4. He counted the steps as he descended, the numbers a frantic litany under his breath. He reached the 4th floor landing and swiped his card. The reader chirped a flat, mocking red. He tried the 5th. Red. The 6th. Red. He was trapped on the 3rd floor, the logistics department. His own desk sat in the center of a sea of gray cubicles, a lonely island under the harsh fluorescent lights. The office was empty, the silence punctuated only by the distant, rhythmic ticking of a wall clock that seemed to be counting down the seconds of his remaining freedom. He walked to his desk, his legs feeling like lead. He needed to send the file. If he could get the protocol to a journalist, maybe the truth would be enough to counteract the frame-up. He sat down and plugged the drive into his terminal. The screen flickered to life, the OmniStream logo glowing with an artificial, predatory brightness. He opened his email, his fingers trembling as he typed the address of an investigative reporter he'd followed for years. He attached the file and hit send. A window popped up in the center of the screen. Uploading. 1%, 2%. Suddenly, the progress bar stopped. A line of red code slashed across the screen, followed by a digital image that made Elias's breath catch. It was a photo of him, taken just minutes ago in the server room, his face twisted in the heat of the struggle with Miller. Overlaid across his forehead in bold, mocking letters was the word, thief. The file disappeared. He tried again. The same result. A ghost program was living on the network, a digital parasite that was eating his data as fast as he could produce it. It wasn't just blocking him. It was taunting him. Elias leaned back, his eyes stinging. The air in the office smelled of stale coffee and industrial bleach, a scent so sharp it made his head ache. He looked around his cubicle, seeking some shred of normalcy, but his desk was wrong. Elias was a man of absolute precision. He knew exactly where every pen, every post-it note, and every paperclip lived. His chair was always tucked in so that the armrests were exactly 1 inch from the edge of the desk. The chair was now 3 inches away. His stapler had been moved to the left side of the monitor. His framed photo of the Vermont woods, the only personal item he allowed himself, was tilted at a 5-degree angle. He reached for his phone, his hand shaking. He needed to call his sister to tell her to get the kids out of the house. But as he pressed the screen, the phone didn't show his home screen. It began to play an audio file. "I don't need a seat. I'll stand here, exactly 2 feet from the exit. It's safer for the flow of traffic." It was his own voice. A recording from 3 days ago, a private conversation he'd had with himself while pacing his apartment. "The ground isn't real unless you count it." The recording continued, a montage of his most private moments, his whispers, his fears. Marcus Sterling wasn't just stealing his career. He had breached the walls of his home. He had reached into Elias's very soul and turned his own mind into a weapon. Elias stood up, the chair screeching against the floor. He couldn't stay here. The walls were closing in, the fluorescent lights flickering in a synchronized pulse that felt like a headache taking physical form. He ran for the parking garage, the only exit his car might still open. The garage was a concrete wasteland, the air stagnant and humid, smelling of old rubber and exhaust. Elias fumbled for his keys, his eyes darting between the thick concrete pillars. Every shadow looked like Miller. Every hum sounded like a funeral dirge. He found his sedan, a modest, gray vehicle that reflected his desire to be invisible. He scrambled inside and slammed the door, the lock clicking with a reassuring thud. He started the engine, the vibration of the car grounding him. 1, 2, 3. As he backed out of the space, a pair of blindingly bright LEDs ignited in the darkness behind him. A massive black SUV, its windows tinted to a void-like black, lunged from the shadows of the executive parking tier. The vehicle didn't slow down. It roared, the engine a predatory snarl that echoed off the low ceiling. Elias floored the gas, his tires screaming as he swung the sedan toward the exit ramp. The SUV followed, its heavy bumper inches from his trunk. "Come on, come on!" Elias hissed, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. He pushed the car to its limit, the concrete pillars blurring past like the bars of a cage. He saw the exit gate ahead, the orange light of the street beyond. But the SUV was faster. It pulled alongside him, the sheer mass of the vehicle dwarfing his sedan. With a violent jerk, the driver swerved, slamming into Elias's passenger side. The impact was deafening, a screech of tearing metal and shattering glass. Elias's head hit the window, the world spinning into a blur of gray and orange. His car spun, sliding across the oil-stained floor toward a massive support pillar. He didn't think. He didn't count. He threw the door open and rolled onto the concrete just as his sedan crumpled against the pillar with the force of a bomb. Elias lay on the ground, his lungs burning, the smell of gasoline and burnt rubber filling his senses. He watched as the black SUV paused, its engine idling with a low, rhythmic thrum. For a moment, he thought the driver would get out to finish him. But then, the vehicle reversed and vanished into the darkness of the upper levels, leaving him alone in the wreckage. He crawled toward the stairwell, his knees scraped and bleeding. He needed to find a terminal that wasn't connected to the main hub. He needed to understand what he was fighting. He found a secluded maintenance terminal in the basement, a dusty machine used for monitoring the HVAC system. He bypassed the basic security and began to dig into the code of the ghost program that had intercepted his upload. His fingers flew across the keys, the rhythmic tapping the only sound in the damp, dark room. As the layers of encryption peeled away, he saw the truth. This wasn't OmniStream software. It was a product of a private intelligence firm called Apex Sentinel. It was a stress test AI, designed to identify, isolate, and break a human target through a combination of digital surveillance and psychological manipulation. Marcus Sterling wasn't just firing him. He was using Elias as a laboratory rat to test a new piece of reputation destruction software. He was a variable in an equation of cruelty. Elias sat back, the cold light of the monitor reflecting in his eyes. He felt a new sensation, not fear, but a hard, cold knot of anger. If he was a variable, then he would change the value. He would feed the AI exactly what it wanted, but he would hide a poison pill in the data. He began to code, his mind focusing on the sequence, the numbers, the beautiful, unyielding logic of a virus that looked like a confession but acted like a grenade. By Thursday morning, the office felt like a funeral parlor. The air was thick with the cloying, sweet scent of expensive lilies, the exact smell of a high-end wake. Elias walked through the lobby, his head down, but he could feel the eyes of his colleagues on him. They weren't looking at him with pity. They were looking at him with the morbid curiosity people have for a car wreck. The embezzlement allegations had been leaked to the intranet an hour ago. $1 million, missing from the logistics fund, with a digital trail leading straight to Elias Thorne's terminal. Elias! The voice boomed across the marble floor. Marcus Sterling stood beneath the gold-plated statue of the faceless man in the center of the lobby. He was wearing an Arctic white shirt, the silver tag on his hanger probably still warm. He looked perfect. He looked like the truth. "We are very disappointed, Elias," Marcus said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. He used the royal we, the corporate mask, for his own ego. "We trusted you with the architecture of our future, and you chose to renovate your own pockets." The staff gathered in a silent circle. Jennifer Davis, the HR director, stood at Marcus's side, her artificial smile wavering. "We're so sorry it came to this, Elias, you know," she said, her voice a frantic staccato. "It's just, the evidence is so clear, you know." Elias stood his ground. He didn't look at Marcus's eyes. He looked at his tie. It was straight. Perfect. "I didn't take the money, Marcus," Elias said, his voice flat and clipped. Marcus stepped closer, the scent of his expensive cologne, something like cedar and old money, overpowering the lilies. "The optics are simply sublime, Elias. You have the drive, you have the access, and now you have the shame." He turned to the crowd. "Let this be a lesson in harmony. We do not tolerate discord." Elias walked away, the silence of the lobby ringing in his ears. He felt like he was walking through water, every movement slow and heavy. "Elias, in here." A hand grabbed his arm and pulled him into a darkened supply closet. It was Sarah. She looked like she hadn't slept in a week, the dark circles under her eyes like bruises. She reached into her bag, the crinkle of her binders loud in the small space. "I have it," she whispered, handing him a small, sleek device. "It's a high-gain recorder. I managed to plant a receiver in the executive boardroom. Sterling is meeting with the board at noon to finalize the disposal. This is the only way, Elias. You get him on tape admitting it's a frame-up, and the AI can't touch you. The truth will be too loud to ignore." Elias looked at the device. It was cold, heavy, a glimmer of hope. "Why are you doing this, Sarah? You could lose everything." Sarah looked away, her fingers tracing the edge of a receipt binder. "My mother couldn't prove where the grocery money came from. I won't let them do it to you. Just get the recording, and don't get caught." Subverted. Elias waited until the lunch hour, when the hallways were thin and the security rotations were at their weakest. He counted the tiles, 12, 13, 14, as he crept toward the executive wing. He reached the boardroom door, his heart a frantic bird in his chest. He swiped a maintenance override card Sarah had given him. The door clicked open. The room smelled of mahogany and power. He crawled under the massive table, his fingers brushing the cold underside of the wood. He found the receiver Sarah had described and attached his recorder. He huddled there, his knees tucked to his chest, counting his breaths. The heavy doors opened. He heard the click-slide of Marcus's shoes. The Thorne variable is almost neutralized. Marcus's voice boomed, vibrating through the table above Elias's head. "The AI has performed beautifully. The board is ready for the sacrifice." "And the offshore accounts?" Another voice asked. Robert Smith, the chairman. Are they secure? Perfectly, Marcus replied. The $1 million is sitting in a Cayman shell as we speak. By the time the auditors look, the trail will be a tangled mess of Thorne's digital signatures. He's the perfect thief because we've given him no choice but to be one. Elias felt a surge of pure, electric hope. He had it. Every word, every confession, captured in high-definition audio. He felt the weight of the recorder in his hand. It was his shield, his sword. He had finally outmaneuvered the man in the Arctic white shirt. He waited until the room cleared, his mind already racing ahead to the police station, to the headlines, to the moment he would watch Marcus Sterling's perfect world shatter. He slipped out of the boardroom and headed for the express elevator, the recorder tucked safely in his inner pocket. He felt like he was flying. The ground was finally real. The elevator doors slid open. Marcus Sterling was standing inside. Elias froze, but it was too late. Marcus reached out, his hand like a vice, and yanked Elias into the small mirrored box. The doors hissed shut. You have something of ours, Elias, Marcus said, his voice a low, predatory whisper. He didn't wait for an answer. He slammed Elias against the brushed steel wall, the impact rattling Elias's brain. Marcus's hands, usually so clean and manicured, were rough as they tore the recorder from Elias's pocket. Did you think we didn't know? Marcus asked, holding the device up. He smiled, but his eyes were like chips of ice. Did you think Sarah Johnson was your friend? He pressed a button on the side of the recorder. It didn't play back the confession. Instead, it emitted a steady, rhythmic pulse of blue light. It's not just a recorder, Elias. It's a GPS beacon. It's been broadcasting your location to my security team since the moment you took it. And the confession you heard? We knew you were under the table. It was a performance. A script written specifically to lure you into a felony. Marcus leaned in, his face inches from Elias's. You just committed illegal surveillance of a corporate board. You broke into a secure wing. You stole proprietary data. We don't even need the embezzlement anymore. You've buried yourself. He gripped Elias's throat, his thumb pressing into the windpipe. And if you ever think about trying again, I know where your sister lives. I know the name of your nephew's preschool. One word from me, and their lives become as messy and unfortunate as yours. The elevator reached the lobby. The doors opened to a sea of flashing lights. Police officers, news cameras, and a crowd of silent, staring employees. Marcus stepped out, smoothing his tie. 1, 2, 3. He looked at the officers inside, a perfect mask of corporate regret. Officers, thank God you're here. We've caught the intruder. Elias stood in the mirrored box, his reflection shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. He had no recording. He had no ally. He had nothing but the weight of his own foolishness. The handcuffs felt like ice on his wrists. The police led him through the lobby, the flashbulbs of the cameras blinding him. He saw Sarah standing near the elevators, her eyes fixed on a leather binder, her hands trembling. She didn't look at him. She couldn't. Wait, Elias said, his voice cracking. The town hall. You're live streaming it, aren't you, Marcus? Marcus turned, his smile artificial and bright. Of course. Transparency is the cornerstone of OmniStream. We want the world to see justice being done. Then let's go, Elias said, a strange, quiet strength returning to his voice. I want to see it too. The town hall was held in the main auditorium, a space of glass and light that felt like a cathedral of capitalism. Hundreds of employees sat in the tiered seats, their faces illuminated by the massive screens that lined the walls. Marcus took the stage, his Patek Philippe watch gleaming under the spotlights. "Today is a difficult day for the OmniStream family," he began, his voice a lulling crescendo. "But we must be brave. We must excise the rot to save the tree." He gestured to the screen. "We have the proof. The digital trail of Elias Thorne's betrayal." He hit the play button on his remote. But the video of Elias in the server room didn't play. Instead, the screen flickered, a line of green code slashing through the corporate graphics. Elias's poison pill had activated. The disposal protocol itself had been the carrier. By trying to use the protocol's data to frame Elias, Marcus had invited the virus into the heart of the system. The AI, designed to destroy reputations, found a new target: its creator. The screens erupted with a flood of data. Not Elias's signatures, but Marcus's. Real offshore bank logs, wire transfers to Apex Sentinel, the original, unedited disposal protocol document, with its 40 pages of planned cruelty, scrolled past for the entire company, and the live-streamed audience of thousands to see. The auditorium fell into a stunned, vacuum-like silence. Sarah Johnson stepped forward from the wings. She wasn't looking at her binders anymore. She looked straight at Marcus. "I'm not an avoider anymore, Marcus," she said, her voice clear and resonant. "And I wasn't working for you. I'm a federal informant. I've been building this case for 2 years. I just needed someone brave enough to be the bait. I needed someone Marcus would trust enough to play his games with." She looked at Elias, a small, sad smile on her lips. "I'm sorry I had to let you fall, Elias. But it was the only way to make him jump." The police, who had been standing by to take Elias away, moved toward the stage. Robert Smith, the chairman, stood up, his hand going to his tie. 1, 2, 3. As he watched his perfect world dissolve into a sea of incriminating data. Marcus Sterling didn't scream. He didn't fight. He stood under the spotlights, his Arctic white shirt suddenly looking like a shroud. He looked at his watch, then at the handcuffs. For the first time, the chaos had won. Elias stood in the back of the room as the officers led Marcus away. The weight of the building, the pressure of the glass towers, the suffocating hum of the servers, it all seemed to evaporate. He felt light. He felt visible. A week later, Elias sat in the executive suite. The board of directors sat around the mahogany table, their postures rigid, their voices smelling of desperation. "We need a new CFO, Elias," Robert Smith said, his voice like gravel in a blender. "Someone with integrity. Someone the public trusts. You're a hero. The promotion is yours. The salary, the stock options. It's more than you ever dreamed of." Elias looked around the room. He saw the 12 chairs, the 13th place setting that no one mentioned. He saw the cold marble and the sterile air. He thought about the numbers, the counting, the constant, frantic need to find the ground. "No," Elias said. The word was small, but it filled the room. "I don't want the chair," Elias said, standing up. "I don't want the architecture. I spent my whole life trying to be invisible so the system wouldn't hurt me. Then I spent a week trying to be the system so I could survive. I'm done with both." He walked out of the boardroom, through the lobby, and out into the biting Chicago wind. He didn't count the steps. He didn't look for the exits. He just walked. He drove north, the city shrinking in his rearview mirror, until it was nothing but a gray smudge on the horizon. He reached the cabin in Vermont as the first snow began to fall. The air was bone-deep cold, but it was clean. It tasted of pine and silence. He sat by the fireplace, the wood crackling and popping. He pulled a small, battered drive from his pocket, the final copy of the disposal protocol. He held it for a moment, feeling the cold metal against his palm. Then he dropped it into the heart of the fire. He watched the plastic melt, the circuits hiss and curl, until there was nothing left but ash. Elias Thorne leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. For the first time in 32 years, he didn't need to count. He knew exactly where he was. He was home.